Oh, hi there. It's been quite a while. You must be here for a CSS video, yeah? I wanted to talk about Tailwind CSS. It's a drastically different way of writing CSS, so I want to do a little mini review. And to understand why Tailwind CSS is so important, I think we got to look back at where we started writing style sheets back in the day. We started writing huge style sheets back in the day. I'm talking thousands of lines long, and that technically still holds today. But they had crazy selectors, pretty old CSS properties. I'm talking floats and all that kind of stuff. And we moved on to responsive styles, where each style sheet represented the device that we served that style sheet to. Mobile.css, tablet.css, desktop.css. Oh boy. Give me palpitations a bit. Then Sass came in and it's like, yo, you got the power to do nesting and all this crazy file folder organization. So we had layout folders, navigation folders, component folders, and we started nesting all of our selectors together to create these wild selectors. And we brought our media queries and we moved our media queries into our style sheets right inside of the element that it was styling, which was incredibly nice. And then JavaScript frameworks came along and we got styled components and CSS-in-JS where we could put our CSS right where we put our markup. And the styles would actually be dynamic and tied to our state. That was incredibly addicting, and it was awesome to have that flexibility and that colocation of our styles. Then Tailwind came along, and it just had this very simple language that you put directly in your markup. So it had that same sort of addicting colocation that a lot of the other solutions, newer solutions, had. And for me, colocation is incredibly important because I don't want to have to go around to all these different files where I have my nav file for markup, my nav file for CSS. They might be in different folders altogether, like a CSS folder and a HTML folder. They might not be co-located together. And having to look around, having to bounce around files, that breaks up my flow and it's very disrupting. So solutions like CSS-in-JS and Tailwind are very appealing to me. I especially like CSS-in-JS simply because you have the full power of CSS without having to learn a second framework, and you have dynamic styles all within your markup. So you're not bouncing around, and you get this ultimate power of writing CSS. It's very nice, I must say. Then there's Tailwind, which kind of feels like an in-between. You have your styles right there, but it's not as flexible as you might think. You might think, oh my gosh, how dare you muddy my markup with styles? But your mind kind of just ignores it. Kind of like it ignores the nose on your face. You know, you look at your nose right now and you can see I have a nose. But when you're just looking around daily life, you don't see your nose. And it's just like writing styles. You know, you look at your HTML when you want to see your HTML. You look at your functions when you want to look at them. And then you see your styles when you want to look at them. They don't really get in the way once you sort of get used to that. And honestly, there's not that much to learn about Tailwind. You'll be referencing the docs a lot, but now we have Copilot and Cursor to help us out when we need to translate CSS to Tailwind. Now really, that's where my affection for Tailwind ends, because we have this layer of abstraction now. We have to think in CSS, but then we got this extra layer of Tailwind that we got to work on top. It's not too bad for the majority of the styles that you'll be writing, but it can be a bit frustrating when we want to do more complex things like animations or maybe properties that are more open-ended like clip path or linear gradients. Let's say I wanted to do a crazy clip path polygon octagon where I wanted to change from an octagon to a heart. You can't really do that in Tailwind. You'd have to do it inline, or maybe there's a plugin for it. I'm not too sure. Or maybe you want to do a dotted background with radial gradient, or a striped background with linear gradient. You can't quite do that with Tailwind either. If you want to do a complex animation, you'd have to extend the config, but usually animations revolve around transform, and right now in Tailwind 3, transform is bundled into one property. So if you apply transform properties with Tailwind on your element, but then you want to, do some craziness with it in your config, it's kind of weird, because now we can separate our properties in modern CSS where we have just scale. What is this transform you talk about? Just rotate. What is this transform you talking about? And how does that work with Tailwind? I don't know. It drives me crazy every time. The other problem with Tailwind is it's incredibly inconsistent. CSS itself is consistent. You have a key and a value. It looks like an object with some weird selector at the top. Display, flex, background, red. Tailwind doesn't have a clear language. It sometimes makes classes up like M, P. What do you think those are? Margin, padding. Sometimes it'll drop the key and just leave the value of flex. Or other times it just makes up its own thing. What do you think line height in Tailwind is? Let me give me a guess. You would say line height, right? Yeah, you're saying line height. No, it's leading. What is leading? Yo, I ain't no designer. I'm a developer in this code. What do you think letter spacing is? Give me a guess. You think it's spacing? You think it's letter spacing? I would think so too. No, it's tracking. Tracking? Oh my gosh, tracking is for my treadmill. I don't even know what you're talking. Tracking's for the hunter down the road. Get out of here, girlfriend. And don't get me started on the scales. Margin 1, M1. How many pixels is that? It's 2 pixels. Border 1. How many pixels is that? That's not a Tailwind class. I don't know. Border 1 doesn't exist. So, margin PX, MPX. What is that? Margin 1 pixel. Sweet. Border PX. What is that? That doesn't exist. Border PX doesn't exist. So what is 1 pixel border? It's just border. So then, how come margin, a 1 pixel margin, isn't just M? That's how wildly inconsistent it is. And I'm not talking just about these few properties. I'm talking you just go down the docs and it's like half the properties are like that. To their credit, they're somewhat trying to make it a little bit more consistent. I've seen the box shadow property in version 4. They used to have it so that shadow was the smallest. Don't quote me on that. And then shadow SM was smaller than larger than anyway, they're trying their best. But those inconsistencies drive me up a wall, and it's day to day. I understand why they do it. They're trying to create a concise language based on CSS, but the way they tried to accomplish that, it's not working out. It's kind of weird. But if you were to be completely consistent, then it would be a lot to type. So I also understand that aspect. So the question I would have you ask yourself is, how do you prefer to write CSS in your projects? It's completely okay to have a separate file for styles. It's completely okay to have your styles right below your component, like with styled components or CSS modules. It's completely okay to have CSS-in-JS where you have entirely beautiful objects representing your styles right there with your markup. And it's entirely okay to have a single line of class names that represent the styles that will be generated. I think we're honestly to a point where that's all it comes down to. What gets you writing styles as fast as you can write styles and as best as you can write styles. Anyway, I like writing CSS. It's pretty fun. If there's anything that you need help with, please leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer it as best as I can and maybe make a video about it. I'm trying to reach you guys just to help. That's why I make these videos. I just want to help you guys out. And if there's anything I can do, just let me know. Get that tailwind out of here, girl. Get that tailwind out of here. Get your inconsistent classes out of here, girlfriend. Yo, get your thing out of here.